I'm first going to read the recognition. London and Middlesex Community Housing provides housing on the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Lunay, Haywak, and Attawandaron. We acknowledge the local First Nations communities in this area, the territory of the Chippewa of the Thames, the Oneida of the Thames, and the Munsee Delaware Nation. We honor and respect the history, languages, and culture of the diverse Indigenous people who call this territory home. Today, the City of London and Middlesex County is home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people. We are grateful to have the opportunity to work and live in this territory. Completion and acceptance of the agenda. I just need a mover and seconder for that. Moved by Mayor Grantham, seconded by Councillor McAllister. All those in favor? That matter is passed. The next matter is disclosures of interest. Does anybody have an interest they need to disclose? There being none, we will proceed on to the approval of the minutes of the meeting of April 17, 2025. They were distributed to the board, so I'm going to make the assumption that everyone has had a chance to read them. Is someone prepared to move the acceptance of that? Moved by Kara, seconded by Greg. All those in favor? That matter is passed. The next matter is communications, and they appear starting at page 12 of the agenda. You'll see that we received confirmation from the City of London of the extension of terms for myself, Greg Thompson, and Kathleen Savoy. So you will see that our terms have all been extended. Although it looks like there's a typo in Kathleen's. It says 2026 from December 31, 2026. I assume that's 2024. Right. All right. And then the annual general meeting we'll see is going to be at 9 a.m. on Monday, June 9th, 2025, which normally myself and the CEO attend. And that will be the plan again this year. And we can talk about that, but that's something we normally do once a year. It's always nice to go to City Hall. Yeah, go ahead.
Just for clarity and for our viewing audience, the AGM is actually on June 17th.
Oh, yeah, did I read that wrong?
Yes, the due date for our
I'm sorry.
Submission is on June 9th. So just
sorry, that's my fault. So the meeting's on June 17th. Do we have a board meeting before then, or is that?
There is no board meeting scheduled after today until August.
Perfect. Okay, so we don't have to worry about that. So
there is a board workshop on the 19th.
I thought that this year I would just comment on, I would just like to provide a summary to council of the various things we've done in terms of rejuvenation, you know, the highlights sort of the positive things that we're doing to sort of counteract, if possible, not maybe that's the wrong word, some of the negative things that we've heard, so that, you know, I really want to say to them, look, you know, from where this is the right path we're on, we believe that this will yield substantial dividends as we move down the road, but it's going to take some time. So I want to firmly establish that. And then if there's anything to say with regard to the budget coming out of tonight, how we view that process, then I might briefly say something about that, but not in a negative or rambunctious way. Yes, Mayor.
Just so you're prepared, Chair, Councillor Carso posted on his social media page the date of the meeting. So all are welcome to attend. But just so you're prepared.
Yeah, that's fine. Great, thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm not sure if yourself and Paul or John gets drafted into it, but I'm sure the asset management, I know that's generally later on, but I'm sure that'll get brought up as well. So just prepared.
We'll be prepared to speak to that. That wouldn't be something I would speak to. I would turn that over to Sam.
So, and just through the chair, the asset management plan, as approved by our board, is being shared with the City of London at SPPC meeting on Tuesday afternoon. So the City of London staff will be, it is a public document now. It's shared with that package, even though it was shared earlier with our board package. So we expect that most questions pertaining to the asset management plan will be contained to that meeting, and myself, and Director of Asset Renewal, John Krill, have been asked to attend in case there's questions from council for LMCH.
Right. All right. Anything further on that communication? Thank you very much.
I would love to attend. Ordinance.
There you go. The next matter we have is delegations, and there are none. Consent agenda items, there are none. So we'll go right to reports and business. Before we do this, a lot of us went through this the other night, which was Tuesday. So I don't think, just for you, Chair, I don't, we don't need probably full staff reports on all of these. I don't know if you've contemplated that, but on some or on all, or what did you envisage?
I'm going with the agenda here that Rob will present, highlights of the
Highlights.
first two, and John will do the first two, and I will deal with the reports for information.
All right. So we'll have more fulsome reports on the ones for approval and less so on that. Okay. So what I'm going to do then is turn things over to the chair of that committee to go through the reports for approval, and then the reports for information. So I'll turn that over to you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. And through the chair, the first report for approval, staff report 2025-19 is the 2024 audited financials, and I'd ask that Rob Cunnington, our Director of Finance, walk us through that, please.
Yes, thank you. Through the chair, this report's being brought forward to the board. The draft audited financial statements and audit findings report to the board for approval tonight. As everyone's aware, LMCH is subject to an annual external financial audit, which is in accordance with Canadian public sector accounting standards. KPMG undertakes that audit on behalf of the City of London, and they work with the finance group here at LMCH starting in about the second week of April through to about the second week of May, working on that audit. And there were, the report stated there were no complications or concerns. There were a few recommendations for either changes to controls or also with corrections or adjustments to the financials as they were stated. But overall, the report was presented that we had fairly presented the financial position of LMCH as of the end of December 31st, 2024 in all material respects. If you'll notice attached to the report is 3 items, obviously. The audit report from KPMG itself. So they detailed that with all of those comments that they've had on their review. Also included are the actual draft audited financial statements for approval tonight. And you'll also notice that there's a reconciliation of those audited financials, which compares the report from Q4, so the internal financial statement from Q4 that was presented in March, to the audited financial statements. It shows the differences that then arrive to those operational numbers in financial statements, because they are quite different based on items through capital and what have you. There was some good discussion around adding additional information next year to the audited financials, such that the board can actually, and perhaps even the public, can take those internal operational statements and then have the capital numbers included, which would then show a consolidated figure, and it would give those differences between operational and capital. So there was a good discussion at the FAR committee on that. And that's about it.
Great, thank you, Rob. I will just add to that, just some of the discussion we had at the committee with respect to what Rob has touched on, the optics of the organization showing a $60 million operating surplus without showing that those funds are actually dedicated to capital projects, as indicated in the dead number that Rob had drafted, showing the explanation of differences between the statements. There was a discussion with the partner at KPMG with respect to that. There's no ability to alter that without compromising our adherence to public sector accounting standards that requires any transfers from other levels of government, whether it be for capital or operating, showing those revenue. And the recommendation from the committee to management going forward was that we seek some alternative disclosure that we can have either as a note in the statement or as an accompanying piece to allow users of the statements to more easily discern that those are capital dollars.
Can I just ask a question about it? A little or no load accounting, so. That's an in, is it not like a corresponding pending expense that would offset it?
So it's not an expense because it's capital.
It's capital,
And
but I
so
mean,
it's a cash outlay, but the
Okay.
capital sits as an asset on the balance sheet. And the
there's
only
no
corresponding,
liability that offset.
there's no liability to offset it, except to the extent that the capital is financed through, for example, any CMHC loans that we might have against the assets. And it gets expensed over time through the depreciation of the assets that it's the operating statement.
That's important to note too, through the chair, that even that surplus of 16 million eventually goes into capital assets.
Okay.
Going into the building, it just shows as what you call surplus at this time, just because revenues expenditures have to be recorded according to public sector guidelines.
Okay. Any further questions or comments with respect to the audited financials? Seeing none, look for a motion to approve the financial statement.
Recording in progress.
Okay. Tara and a seconder, Hadley, thank you very much. All in favor? Okay, that is approved. Second staff report number 20 on the operating budget update and reforecast. Also asked Rob Cummings, Director of Finance, to walk us through that.
And yes, thank you very much. And through the chair, the purpose of this report is to receive and approve the reforecasted LMCH 2025 operating budget. This is a brief background. The board had previously approved the 2025 provisional operating budget in February of 2024. And that was also subject to recosting or amendments based on revenue expenditures throughout 2024 year end. So this budget itself has been recosted based on that, and includes an increase of $585,000 for property tax increases, and that represents the difference between our original budget for property taxes, which was an increase of 2.5% each year in the 4-year multi-year budget, and the actual percentage increase of around 7%. So that is the difference there. In addition to that, we also have a couple of additions to revenues, given the increased performance of management of overdue accounts and with tenant rents. We're increasing the budget on both forgiveness and bad debt recoveries for a total of about $250,000. Therefore, the net result is a change in the budget of $335,000 as a deficit for 2025.
Colin?
A general one, I'm not sure, Rob, this may get bounced over to Paul. There's more in terms of, I don't know if there's ratios with these or KPIs, but I look at salary, wage, and benefits, and this may be down the road more of a cap budget question when we get there. But just I looked at it 2 months ago, and I looked at the amount of money we spend on salaries, wages, and benefits, and I just look at that number, and I have no way of gauging if that's in line with business practices or with other housing corporations. And so I look at that, and then I also look at, what we spend on maintenance, materials, and services. So that's my question, just generally, Paul or yourself, is there a guideline for an entity like this, about how much you should spend on salaries? It just, because if that jumps out at me, I'm sure it's going to jump out at somebody else at some point in time.
I could just start out just in terms of my experience with public sector, not so much housing itself. But in the public sector, generally salaries, wages, and benefits, comprise about 75 to 80% of all expenditures.
Okay.
With public housing, I think we have a little less because there's additional expenditures on the operational side for the properties. I know Paul has much more experience in the area, though. I don't know if there's anything else you could add around that.
Yeah, I think we're a little lower, and I would say that it seems the number has jumped up significantly because over the last 10 years, we've grown from an organization with like 55 employees, which was significantly understaffed, to an organization of about 100 employees. And we have created our own community safety team and unit with has 7 full-time employees. And this includes bringing the custodian services in-house, which would take a contracted service line in the maintenance and pop it into the salary line. So I think we can, we will continue to sort of, as we sort of look at our budget and look at our operations, look for those comparators as we bring information forward. But it is, I think we have to sort of recognize where we make the decision to deliver the service in-house, because I think we can do a more focused, mission-oriented role. That's okay as long as it's in the budget, and sort of shifting it from contracted vendor to staffing has a positive impact for staff, and we have to find that right balance. So I think that's something we can sort of look at as we go through our budgeting process over the next few years, as we are getting squeezed a little bit. But I would say that, in the maintenance, material and services, we presented, a deficit budget.
Yeah.
Because we know we have work to do on the site budgets. And one of the things that we may end up doing is rolling this back to 2024 levels to get 2 or 3 percentage point increases that are built into some of these lines out. But the challenge with that is we're balanced that against service delivery. So one of our expectations, and one of the things we're talking about, is as we increase the staff line, we expect a shift in how the percentage of work completed by frontline staff versus vendors. So that's really the focus has been sort of shifting to focus on that point over the last year and a bit, and we're making progress. So that will continue to be our focus, because we need to have a return on investment for that staff person, both in the service delivery to tenants, but also on the bottom line of the organization. So we are conscious of it. It's just, in our budgeting process, as we work through 2025, we need to get the site budgets done. And there's 34 of those, and that will tell us where there may be savings on that line.
Okay, and I know where we'll see it. I just wanted to ensure that
We're
as a board, we could justify, right? So the verbiage that I heard about the public sector.
Yeah.
And yours, so if one of Hadley's colleagues or one of mine or anybody were to ask about that line, we have rationale. So that was easily available at the top of line. So that's what I wanted to ensure.
Yeah, and we can make sure we'll look at Toronto Community Housing and other larger providers and look at the percentage points. Because that's an easy, is it 25%, 30%? Yeah.
Knowing the lens that's on budgets these days, now one jumps out at people, but it's just, to me, it's justifiable, so.
Yeah.
But we certainly can report in future meetings on some of those.
Yes, and there's another report in the package talking about sort of the budget pressure and the things we need to do. These are the things that are part of that, sort of getting into Lean Six Sigma, sort of, so what are those operational efficiencies? And what is that, making sure staff are fully utilized, where you're not using vendors, all that is part of the exercise we're undergoing.
I'm satisfied, thank you.
Thank you through the chair. Bill's trigger, but we talked about this Tuesday. In terms of the property taxes, so appreciate that being called out in the letter as well. That obviously budgeted a certain amount that was higher than expected. So I think it's good that it was called out and included in the letters.
Yeah. I'm not triggered today. I was triggered on Tuesday. He's only allowed me 1 trigger per meeting in a week. Okay,
All right.
so you're safe.
Okay.
Okay, any more questions or comments with respect to the operating budget update? Seeing none, may I have a motion to approve, please? Colin, second by Kara, all in favor? That's carried. Good now, thanks Rob for those two. John, you are up for Director of Asset Renewal Q1 update. Okay. Sorry.
We put that up here from the beginning. I know.
Well, you know what, this is an August group and I don't feel worthy, so.
We gave you the low chair.
The kitty table.
Psychological.
There we
Girl is a very smart person.
go. So which, sorry, Greg,
This Q1 update.
Q1 update, directors,
Yeah.
Director Asset Renewal. Super, thank you, Greg, and through the chair. This particular report is for information, and there is one approval. It's for a change order to the regeneration plan contract. That the original contract specified number of consultation sessions, which we've exceeded, and we've also exceeded the mode of delivery of those consultation sessions. So this change order is to account for that increased scope of work in the contract. So looking for approval on that. I also might add that the value is specifically, we say up to an amount of, because we're negotiating a decrease in that change order. So that's what that's all about. Since I'm talking about the regeneration plan, let me just make a few highlights, if I can, and then I want to talk about the asset management plan, if that's okay. So as far as strategic initiatives go, the regeneration plan is certainly top of mind. The project is going along well, completed phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 is ongoing, as is phase 4. Specifically, the consultation sessions, we've completed all of them, and the tenant consultation sessions are done in a number of different ways. Mailers to seniors, door knocking in adult buildings, and Survey Monkey link to family sites. We've just completed those within the last 2 weeks, and we're collating the data, and we'll report on that at subsequent meeting. In the appendices, you do have highlights of the first batch consultation sessions, and some of the points that were made. There was a high level of participation across all groups. There's a commentary regarding requiring additional support for community partner work, and leveraging opportunities to generate revenue, which is particularly good in my mind as we look to develop new buildings. Think retail, commercial settings with social housing, above it, that sort of thing, just to paint that type of picture. But that's not the only revenue generating opportunity, but that's sort of things that were talked about. If I can go to the asset management plan, sorry, the one other thing on the regeneration plan, there is a board workshop coming up on June 19th, where you'll get much more detailed feedback and involvement. On the asset management plan, so as Paul mentioned previously, next week the plan will be presented to the city. That's at the SPPC meeting. I guess that's all of council, as I understand, for the most part. Annalise will be presenting, and Paul and I will be there to respond to any questions. There's a couple of key points I want to make sure that are understood. What will be either presenting or answering questions in kind. One key point is that the asset management plan looks at data up to the end of December 2023. So all the good work that's happened since the end of 23 to now, and it's been substantive, isn't reflected. I do mention that because the state of the assets right now, that's reflected in the report, may not be quite the state of the assets that we do have right now. We are advocating for a good asset condition, and that comes with a price tag. That price tag is about 23.5 million, or the way the asset management per year for the next 20 years, or the way the asset management plan presents it, $110 million additional revenue for the next 10 years, or 11 million per year additionally. That's substantive. If we don't expend that amount, then the assets will not attain a good condition, but will attain a fair condition, and moving up from a poor, which they are in right now, on average, right? Not everyone is in poor condition. And less than that, they will maintain or fall into a poor condition overall. So that's pointed out in a couple of the key bullets there, and I imagine there would be lots of discussion there about that. One of the other key points is, what do we do with all the capital that is allocated to us, funded our way? We look at the need of the assets with through a risk lens. So things that take higher priority are high risk items like life safety items, fire alarm panels, electrical infrastructure, that sort of thing. Things that take a lower priority are, for the most part, items that may be are typically past their life cycle, end of life, like infrastructure, storm drains, below ground that are working, but they're well beyond what you typically spend to replace them. But why spend a couple $1 million to replace a pipe that's still draining water, even though it's old, right? It may fail at some point.
Can I
That's
jump in
simple.
there, Chair? Because I was waiting for so obviously I understand municipal asset plans. If we went strictly by the rating on the asset management plan, every building we own in my community, we'd end up tearing down. And that's important. I know we need to, but I know counselors and people are gonna look at our assets and say, oh my God, they're poor. Because a lot of times, don't get me wrong, John, but they'll look at the age of something, and you use the word, that's why I want to jump in, end of life, right? They'll say something is end of life, but it's still viable, it still works, right? Like, I lived in old houses in Old South for years. The windows were by far end of life, they were 50 years old, but they were still functional, they still work, right? And I think that's important. I mean, you're caught because we want to ask for the dollars. I know to the public and the counselors are gonna look at the asset management plan, look at the way the consultants have rated things as poor because they're end of life, but doesn't mean they're not functional, right? Correct me if I'm wrong, because I've gone through a few of these,
You're
of my
bang
own,
on,
right?
yeah.
Seriously, we'd end up tearing down every building we own because they've rated it as fair, but it still works really well.
That's and you're spot on with that, and I think the key use of the word functional is that's important, right? They're functioning. They may fail at some point. I mean, think of underground pipe, right? You hear them failing sometimes, and the sinkhole happens or a pothole gets bigger than normal. Well, you deal with it at that time, right? That's the sort of thing we're talking about versus electrical infrastructure that we're got a program in place where we're upgrading all our high-rise electrical panels, switchgear, heating panels on a very well thought out manner, over a number of years, so that we spread the capital around that sort of thing. Doing that as opposed to digging up parking lots to replace storm drain.
I just want, because I think that's important, because if you go to the meeting of council, they're probably gonna get beat up a little bit, that your properties are fair poor, what are you doing about it? And they explain it to them, but now we've asked for dollars to bring it up to good, but I think when they do start pushing on the condition of building, it's important to point out it's end of life, but doesn't mean it's necessarily bad. Right. A lot of them won't understand.
Just if I may, and through the chair, I think there's two other elements here in respect to, say, some of the county properties.
Yeah.
Where the assessment of the building is really an equation, which is the value of the asset. And how it relates to the cost to repair the asset.
Yeah.
So some of the assets don't have a huge value. So they may have a few $100,000 in repair that needs to be done. Say a new roof and a parking lot or something like that, that is planned, and that will just turn that asset around, right? So in the county properties, we've got, I think, all of them scheduled for roofing projects this year. I think we did one last year. So that roofing project alone will change that number across the sites because of the value of the asset.
And I wasn't thinking about LMCH, I was thinking about what I do, every arena that I have is past the end of life, and it should be torn down according to the asset management plan. And they rate it poor, but it's not really poor, right?
And I think there's similar to what John had said, there's a lot of work being done on the building envelope and systems, right? The makeup air units are the lungs. It keeps the air flowing, the plumbing system moving things around. And there's a lot of, just like the electrical work is very costly and we're working through that, the plumbing work that exists in these 50-year-old buildings will be quite substantive. So while, you know, there may be a $2 million project to do plumbing in one building alone. So the price tag is high, the convenience is high, and you know, you put those off as long as you can for the tenants. But you know, we're not experience immediate failure or issues, but we have to keep that on our radar. We have to have a funding plan in place for that and move along to that. So I think just there's lots of complexity, and I think that's one of the challenges is explaining the story, and it's not to, you know, I think that's why it's critical that we've said as a board that our objective is a good state of repair. And this is not a funding request. This is a state of what's happening.
Yeah.
And the work, the funding we have in place is having an impact. Will continue to have an impact. And I think it's on us as a board and the staff of the organization to continue to pursue funding opportunities through all levels of government to sort of continue to move that needle and improve the state of repair. And I think that's sort of the intent of the plan, is just to say, here's where we're at. Yeah. And you know, we're not trying to hide it. It is what is the reality. This is what the data tells us, and our plan is addressing it.
But one of the challenges you have is the opposite happens, right? You get some people who will say the rating on your building is poor. That means you guys have done a really lousy job keeping your buildings in good shape.
Yeah.
And it'll be attributed, it'll be something that Colin explained in one way.
Yeah.
Somebody else is gonna look at it and say, because I've seen it obviously with this council, where somebody says, oh, what the heck, you guys got all poor buildings, and how could you let that happen?
That's what I'm trying to
Yeah.
insulate the board.
Yeah,
From,
yeah.
right, is that shouldn't happen.
Yeah.
It shouldn't, but
And I think
it will.
if I may, through the chair, if comments come up like that or questions to that end, page 18 of the asset management plan, there's a very good paragraph that somebody wrote that talks specifically about that. 73% of assets being in fair condition, 43% being in poor condition. What comprises that? 43% of buildings that are in poor condition, or that assets are in poor condition, is mostly, the majority, almost 100% site works. What site works? Underground sewers, parking lots, curbs, that sort of thing.
But what I'm saying, yeah, you've got to be able to articulate that it's not.
It's not
Right.
the building itself. Yeah.
That's what I'm just trying to make sure that you go in forearm.
Yeah, no, and I think it's
Forewarned.
fair, and through the chair, I think when we recognize that the base capital budget for LMCH was around $2 million for far too many years.
Yeah.
And that between that $2 million and grants that, you know, between the City of London and the province of Ontario and others, we've been able to do significant work on windows and things like that on high rises. We've been able to find projects and find funding for projects that sort of have moved the needle and kept the asset in this poor state of repair. Like, it's not ideal, but I think the stewards of the asset, with the funding they had, did the best they could, and it's our role to continue on that with more funding. I think we're doing that.
Yeah, and through the chair, to Paul's point, I mean, I think it's also important to recognize that it's compounding over time, right? And that this is a snapshot, sure, but these buildings don't get to that state, or even the underground infrastructure doesn't get to that state overnight, right? Like, this is years of, like you said, like limping along with that limited budget. And that's something, I don't know how hard they come at us. Like, I don't mind defending that, because like, that's what I've always heard, is that, I mean, this didn't happen overnight. There were a lot of decisions made in the past, and, you know, we have to live with them and try to course correct, right? And we do have a plan in place. Like, I think it's important with the asset management plan to also show that we've got the regeneration. Like, we're trying not only with the underground infrastructure, and then, you know, everything goes into the building, but we are in fact, carrying some of them down and building new buildings, right?
Yeah.
But like, that's the first housing we've seen in decades, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, that in itself is important, that we are doing that work. It's just going to take time to correct all of that. Sorry.
Okay.
No, I think it's important conversation.
Yeah, and good discussions. Any more questions for John on the director's update for asset renewal? Okay. There's the motion to approve in there is the increase in the budget for Herco on a best efforts basis to get that in, so, and the rest is received information, so I have a motion for that approval, please. Emily, thank you, seconded by Mayor Grantham, all in favor? You're good there. Thank you. And John, you are up next for the capital project update.
So this particular report, you've seen the same format previously, and this is there's 6 approvals looking for approval for one of which is a cancellation of a project where we found the work was done by others, so no longer necessary, and we'll asking for those funds, 110,000, to be put into general contingency, and then the remaining 5 approvals are reallocating from general contingency to the various projects. One of which the recommendation number 3 is software subscription that previously has been operating expense, and because of the use and who uses primarily for capital, it should be a CapEx item, and the others are the other 4, 5, and 6 are 4 and 5 are 2 projects that were part of a previous fire report where we brought asked for projects to be taken out of cancellation, reopened with the proviso that we would look at them. They had 0 budget dollars in them. We would look at them, assess the need if they are indeed high risk items, and these 2 were, and we're looking for funds from general contingency to make it on those projects and complete them. One is Limberlost pedestrian paving, the other is an electrical equipment upgrade at Walnut. The recommendation 6 is a smaller amount out of general contingency, but that's for an over budget on the Booley lighting project, and the Booley lighting project was about 180 some thousand, so this overage is more than 10% of the project, which is why it's in front of the board, and the overage is primarily due to prepping the site for security camera installs on the light poles, and also having to adjust the scope of work because some of the power for the lighting previous to starting this project we found was being taken from London Hydro, not through a meter, so it has to go through a meter now. So the last one is basically bringing the asbestos reassessment budget or project that was opened up in 2020. We've been charging the 5-year asbestos abatement and work that Pynchon has been doing, managing that for us. We've been charging it to that a particular project, but not adjusting the budget. So this is to right size it, and it's timely because at the end of this year, we are in the process of negotiating a new contract with them, at which time we'll be budgeting on an annual basis for that new 5-year contract. So that just cleans that one up. As far as other items go, I might point out that the capital project statuses, we've now added 2025 projects to the tables that you've seen previously, and as we clean up the project work from prior years 20 and 21 will fall off those tables, and it'll be a bit cleaner, but that's just the organization growing in the right direction. Also have on the second last page, I think there's a interesting visual there that shows the amount of projects by type where this where the capital expenditure is going to, and you'll note that a significant portion, the largest chunk are going to electrical projects. Again, that just ties nicely to, you know, high risk items, things that we need to take care of. And have determined that, you know, electrical projects like switchgear again, and, you know, the generators and whatnot, they're an important item to stay on top of. That's why that's the lion's share of the project categories.
Okay, thank you, John. Questions, comments for John on that update? Okay, seeing none, for a motion to approve the capital projects update. Mayor, thank you. Second by Kara, all in favor? Carried. Okay, remainder, the reports I'll speak to briefly. They're all reports to receive for information. Walk through, there are 6 reports there in your agenda package. I'm not going to go through them in order. I'm just going to jump to and give a little bit more of an overview of a couple ones that I thought were of greater interest. Not that they're all important, but the ones that I were key. The quarterly KPI report. Couple of comments in there with respect to pest control. There's some discussion in committee about the number of units being treated that has increased to being above target, but as noted in the report, part of that is due to improving quicker clearance of units so that there are more being treated in a given time. I also note on vacancy turnover, the average days did increase, but again, part of this due is noted in the report that with the CMHC rule and renovated units being returned to stock, there was a delay in the tenant services getting those units out to being occupied. On budget discussions with respect to the city's request that we seek a 1.5% reduction. LMCH has identified several areas, and 3 recommendations are put forth in here. One, to look for a property tax exemption or a partial rebate to shelter on the impact of the increase in the property tax. It's related to what we spoke about earlier about that 585,000, and actually over the time period that we're looking at, I think that totals about 2.8 million over 5 years, if I recall that correctly. Because that just grows. It's only 585 in the current year, and it gets up to over 1.1 million in a couple of years. Another recommendation is to seek reduced assessments. I believe that would have to go through MPAC. And third recommendation is ask for city support to advocate for the province to change the rental calcs under the Housing Services Act with a goal of getting RGI to a minimum $250 per month per unit. Their Q1 financial update, we did run a 152,000 deficit in the first quarter this year. So far, that is better than budget by 526,000. So take that as a positive. The Reimagined Southdale update. Phase 1 is not scheduled for mid-July handover and August occupancy, and phase 2 tender closed today, did it not?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so those bids are being evaluated for future approval by the board. CMHC renewal project updates. It's worth highlighting that in Q1, 67 units were modified. I had that correct, John? That's a record number so far in that project, so that's well on our way of our target of about 200 units this year. And the Director of Finance and Corporate Services update that Rob provided noted that the audit was complete, discussed some upcoming procurement areas. The IT review is complete as well, recommending hiring an in-house IT manager. So there's my quick summary of the reports for information. Any questions or comments on? Bill?
Yeah, just on the budget discussion, we had a fairly wholesome discussion on that, and the takeaway I had from that was that 2 things. The 1.5% is not a number that's written in stone, and different organizations, different boards will have different impacts and different repercussions that will enable them to meet that goal or maybe not meet that goal. And there's a recognition, as I understood it from the city, or there should be, and we should identify it for them, that we have this extra challenge of the property taxes that we have to meet, and that puts us in a somewhat special circumstance. And I'm hoping as we move forward, there'll be some, I mean, we're prepared, I would assume, to, and we made a motion, I think, at the last board meeting, we do our best to meet that target, but there's obviously some issues surrounding that. And particularly with regard to the fact that we're, along with expected to make cuts, we have this big bump in property taxes that other entities just won't have. So I was encouraged by that. But my view on, obviously, which I'm not gonna go through again, on how this whole budget situation was managed is not a positive one, but I've said that many times, and again, I don't have to say it again. So that I think it was important, the positive we received, and I'm gonna run with that.
Thank you. Through the chair, unfortunately, I missed the conversation on Tuesday, the lively conversation. I guess from an organization perspective, we do have a request from our shareholder to respond to their letter. And while the chair points out it's not mandatory, I guess, how would the board like us to manage that response? We do have an executive committee meeting coming out or in early June, where we could delegate the authority either direct to the chair or to the executive committee, or we could find another way to sort of get the board endorsement on that. I think it's sort of something that we should get a response back, at least initially, in a timely manner. So just looking for direction on that.
So, I mean, what is the response that's requested? Are we being asked to make a budget submission? Are we expected to just say to them, here's where we are? I don't know what they're looking for.
Or could we, and just throwing this out for discussion, the board that was presented with the recommendation was just presented for information, but we get turned back to an approval to proceed on that basis. But like pursue those recommendations further.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, through the chair, like we got our first one today in terms of starting budget deliberations. And so each agency is kind of submitting, so like the letter, for instance.
Yeah.
If that's the route people want to go, we can go that route. And I'll take this chance because Paul's asking for feedback, and I get to wear the two hats, I guess, but I'm wearing this hat right now, and my perspective as a board member is, as Bill indicated, we have pressures that others don't. So honestly, like I'm willing to go to bat to say we can't in the current environment. So I'm willing to stand by that. I'm not sure what others think. If we have any wiggle room, I think, you know, anything that can be put on the table, I think they would appreciate. But I think for us personally, that it's not necessary. Like we weren't part of this. Like this is what I find very frustrating. To Phil's point too, I find it, and I think Colin spoke of this too. Through the strong mayor powers, even if we say no, the mayor still has the ability to come and say, you can make these cuts.
Here's your budget.
Yeah, so this is what I find difficult, is I think we can, as a board, give our perspective and say, this is what we're facing, these are our recommendations. But there is no guarantee, I think, at the end of the day, that the mayor still won't say, this is what I'd like to cut. So that's what I find difficult about the situation. We can do our best, but at the end of the day, if the mayor decides he wants to cut from certain groups, I think he can still give direction to do so, which I find not particularly fair, but that's.
But then I'd rather him have to do that than us.
Yeah, agreed.
To be blunt, I think
Yeah.
what's being done now is an attempt to us to do the cutting that he should be doing, or someone else should be doing. Sorry, that's my
I agree.
That's my view. In other words, I agree with you entirely. Let's do what we can, but
I would say, I think through the chair, the challenge I think we have is the cumulative impact of like looking at 2026, $840-some-odd-thousand unbudgeted property tax increase. And if we had to add in a 1.5% of another $200-some-odd-thousand, we're looking at $1.1+ million. There's, you know, to do that without service impact to tenants is not realistic. So, you know, it's not unusual to deal with above budget items. We'll be dealing with, you know, sometimes snow clearing, sometimes insurance, these things happen. Property tax could be one of those things. However, that on top of a budget reduction would, there's very little capacity to manage that. So we'll have to sort of, I think it would be difficult to recommend some cuts. If this was a 1.5% without this 5% gap we already have in property tax, this wouldn't be as huge of a challenge. That's, I think, from an organization perspective, we do see service cuts if we have to absorb full property tax increases and a budget reduction.
So. I'm gonna put on this hat and I'm like.
Hat? Which one?
I'm gonna put on my board hat.
Okay,
Okay.
And I'm gonna.
I just don't wanna know what hats.
No, because it's important.
I would have.
Because because I'm cognizant of the pressures.
Yep.
That the mayor has. But forgiving property taxes is just a shell game. It's just from one pocket to the other, right? I am not in favor of going with anything. Because given publicity and the pressures that this board's under, including from some counselors and the media and the public, it would be me, I would send a strong message that you're gonna ask us to cut. But there's gonna be service delivery cuts, because again, property tax is just a shell game. That's all you're doing, is from one pocket to the other, so it's still affecting the bottom line. My opinion is, given the pressures that everybody in this building faces, the media and the pressures from some counselors, my vote would be, we have nothing to give. Right? It's like, you know, the banker comes in and says, you gotta cut. I don't got anything to cut, Mr. Banker. That's just my opinion. I'm cognizant of the pressures that, by the way, I revoke my strong air powers. But when the next election's in a landslide. But that's just my opinion. That's why I would support the board by saying, we have nothing to give. And if you wanna cut, you cut. Pardon my French. Don't come and bitch and complain when you're getting pressures about, you know, pest infestation and asset management and all of that. I think just at some point in time, the board has to say no. Put it back on them. And I won't be invited to Josh's tea party. That's my opinion.
Well, it's harder for our counselors, right? I don't, when I say our counselors, I mean
Yeah.
the ones,
Because you can't, because property taxes, you also got county property taxes,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, so that would be, you know, you need a motion, but our response back is we're status quo. And also given the fact that they're sitting on a $60 million surplus, and they're coming back to the Board of Housing to ask for money, that doesn't sit right with me.
Yeah, I mean, I'm willing to second that, honestly.
I will, if the board wants, I will make a motion that our board's response is we're status quo.
I'll second.
I don't have to say anymore, I'll support it, and then the reason I'm gonna support it is, first of all, the obvious reason, we're getting hit with property taxes and the expectations on us are huge. But secondly, there's no guarantee that the 1.5 is gonna apply across the board. I just think there's too many possibilities here that if we did say, oh yeah, we're gonna make a 1.5 cut and somebody else isn't, and they're gonna get away with it. And I've seen that too many times, so I'm gonna support this motion.
Thoughts from others?
Well, I won't be supporting this motion. Because one-time surplus is not ongoing operating revenue. If we don't find any efficiencies, we'll be in the same boat next year. Because there will just be amounts back when the surplus is spent. And I do think that there are things we should be looking at. I'm not going to say that there's significant dollars, and I think we've done some already, and And I said this at the finance committee earlier this week. And I know that it was highlighted by our staff, like the telecoms contract did result in some savings. That's great. I think we need to look at, for example, how many staff are going to conferences and how much we're spending on education and travel. Again, might not be a lot, but we need to be conscious of that. I think we've seen what happens in the hospital and the school board settings when there hasn't been a mindfulness of that kind of spending. So I think we should be looking. So I won't be supporting the status quo. I do, however, agree that, and I said this again at the finance committee, I don't think that 1.5 is reasonable for us because part of the pressure for us is that we are paying residential property tax classifications. Other boards and commissions are not. A board like transit or the police or the museum or the libraries, yes, they have some properties, not nearly the number we have, but they're also paying institutional class property taxes, not residential class, because they're operating as institutional settings where we're taxed as residential settings. So I think it's a little different taxation regime for us. So I don't think it's fair to compare us to the other boards and commissions because of that. But I also think it's not, I also won't support that we're not going to try and do anything. I think that we should try and do something, even if it's a small amount. And I think every board and commission should be trying to do that.
So, Sean, and you know, I've talked to you about those first two things that you mentioned. I'm in agreement with those. I think maybe there's a different phraseology where it's, we will do our best, but to commit to a number. So maybe I'm too strident on the status quo. I'll again concede that comment, but I think there has to be some verbiage where we'll try our best, but to commit to something. So again, I had lost sight of those first two things you mentioned. I agree with those about the conferences and the education. I'm sure you can find dollars in the operating budget. I just don't want to commit to the 1.5%, right? Or commit to a number.
And sorry, rather than sticking my hand up again, I hope you don't mind if I just jump in. But good news is I'm going home tomorrow, so I'll be closer to home for Phil to yell at. But when we're talking about, committing to a number, I would agree with you there, Colin. I don't think that we need to commit to a number. I think that committing to, we will do our best and we will update the mayor and council on the savings we've been able to identify would be something I could support. It's the status quo piece that says we're just, nothing's going to change is where I am not comfortable. But I'd be comfortable with hey, we're going to do our best. I think that we can even point out in a communication back that we've already made a couple of cost saving measures this year. I think we can point to the telecoms contract as one of those. And I think as well, as I mentioned at the finance committee, we should also be reminding council that we're the only board that pays residential property tax rates. Everybody else pays the lower rates of an institutional. So I think that if we were to highlight those two things and just say we're doing our best, we've already found some, but we're not committing to a specific number, that would be something that I could be more supportive of.
Well, I'd be open to a friendly amendment, John.
Well, I think that we should just move to reply to council that we will be doing our best to find cost savings, communicate the cost savings we've identified year to date, and include another message in the communication identifying that we pay a different rate of property taxes than the other boards and commissions. So I know that's a very sloppily worded motion, but hopefully Melissa can capture the intent there with some brilliant wordsmithing. And
but I mean,
I joined at the most interesting time.
Yeah, I didn't see you up there. I might have been a little more careful with my wording if I'd seen you sitting there, John.
So,
Oh, yeah.
we've been talking, I'll just jump in again, so talking a little bit about on looking for the efficiencies, but just I recall in reviewing the letter again that ultimately came from Mayor Josh Martin and Budget Chair Elizabeth Close. They're also looking for opportunities for provincial and federal advocacy, and that's what was brought up in that third point about the fact that our RGI is low at bucks a month, I think, on some units, and there's huge impact there. So in terms of how I would recommend to prioritize these, to me, that is probably has the most potential of getting us somewhere, and really we're aligned with the city and going to the province to revisit those counts.
Yeah, and sorry to jump in again, to the chair. I mean, I still believe the second, the changes that we discussed. I was not comfortable with the 1.5. I think that was too much of an ask for us. I know it was done more, to be fair, across the board, to ask the same from everyone. But I think identifying those pressures, I think also saying the savings we've had. I think my issue still is more with them looking for us to give money back almost to make deeper cuts. So that's where I would draw a red line. And I've said this before, that I'm not willing to sacrifice, especially with our capital projects. Like, that's money cannot touch. Like, this is work that has to continue. So, you know, if we're looking at these operational efficiencies, we would be looking for those presumably anyways. I don't mind identifying them, but I'm not really willing to cut too deep into operations that will impact tenants, anything to do with the capital projects. So again, I'm that's where I'm kind of drawing the red lines, is around those sorts of things, and I don't know what everyone else's thoughts are, but I feel like now is the time for everyone to chime in. Like, I would personally like to hear from everyone in this conversation, just so I have a good sense of the board as a whole, because like Colin said, like sometimes it's just, you know, three of the you know, political representatives, but I really would like to hear from everybody.
I'll speak up. I mean, I think it's nervy. What's the word? Nervy? Of a body that was given the responsibility to set tax rates in the city in a responsible fashion, and in my view, didn't do so in a manner that all of us are talking about in the community. And now they come, I mean, this coming back to us after last year we were asked to cut it, and then say, well, you know, you guys got to make it. It's putting the weight of really bad decisions on the wrong people. And it's saying, you know, those of us who did what we did.
Okay, sorry, I'm gonna call a point of order on you, Phil.
Go ahead.
Yeah, to call decisions bad.
I'm coming right after the council.
Yeah, and to call decisions bad is completely out of line. Okay. No, they weren't. Okay, they weren't. You're being disrespectful of council with your language there.
Yeah,
it's completely inappropriate.
Yeah.
And the funding that the surplus is generated, if you read the report, as you loved to tell councillors to do when you were on council, you'll see that things like increased investment income projections were higher than projected. That was not something council was able to predict when they set the budget a year ago. So to say that they were bad decisions based on information council didn't have at the time is completely unfair and inappropriate on your part.
Okay, can I continue? So here's the challenge I have. If we can identify particular areas that we can decrease, I'm fine with that. I'm absolutely fine with that. But what I'm not, my big fear is that this is going to be an unfair process. That it's not going to be a process where all boards and commissions are treated equally. And I think there's evidence for that. And that's my big concern. I guess perhaps I don't have as much trust in this process as others might have. And I appreciate what the deputy mayor said, but I'm not taking any of it back. not even one bit of it. So that's the end of that.
So this is where I go, we have a seconded motion on, all right. Right, that's what I jumped.
Gonna read back what we have.
Can you read back the motion there? Cause I was willing for a friendly amendment.
The one that you two agreed on?
Yeah.
Okay, so the communication that we'll do our best to find the savings, but not to commit to the numbers. The communication will include speaking to cost saving measures that we have made significantly throughout this year. And identify that we pay a different tax rate of the property taxes and the other boards and commissions. Not pretty yet, but that was the verbiage.
And to look for, I guess those operational efficiencies were available, some, I don't know, I'm just trying to think of the language.
Cause it'll be later on in the budget, the whole budget process. Line by line.
Continue to look for those efficiencies.
You know, I'm okay with that, I just, yeah.
Yeah.
I use inelegant language sometimes, so. Sorry, Chair.
Well, I just,
I'm
I'm
for it.
actually gonna suggest, can we take a step back? Let's clear the 5 other reports that are not the budget discussions. They're just reports to receive for information, and then we can focus on this. Can we do that?
Okay, motion to receive the other four,
Yeah,
The other 5.
4 or 5,
Yes, yes. Okay, thank you. Seconder for all meetings.
oh, yeah,
Okay, seconded by Mayor Grantham, all in favor? Okay, so those 5 reports are on. So we're now just talking about how to amend so receiving the report for information on the recommendations for how to go back to the city. The discussion was, well, and Paul raised the issue how and look for direction from this board as to how we want to go back to that. So we're now looking at the motion
yeah,
as,
you gotta deal with, Robert, you must deal with the motion, so.
yeah,
I get confident.
okay. So we have the motions on the floor.
Yeah.
And it's been,
moved and
it's been
seconded.
seconded,
We
so,
accepted the amendment.
so just for clarification for everyone, because we're gonna have to vote on this now. And Melissa, can you review the motion again as best worded as you've got? And Paul, you look like you wanna say something before.
Great, so I would just point out through the chair that the motion as sort of compiled does not include your recommendation related to sort of the advocacy to the province related to the shelter rates and minimum rent as set out in the Housing Services Act. So we want to include that. So I've heard 4
Yes, that drawer.
4 things sort of coming through the conversation. So maybe instead of doing the sentence, we can sort of simplify these the 4 things we're looking to accomplish. That in this response that we speak to the efforts to date to reduce costs, highlight some of those areas where this is a part of what we're doing, and what we'll continue to do is sort of value for taxpayers dollars, reduce costs, etc. That we express the challenges that we are experiencing with our property tax, and that is an unbudgeted item, and that's a budget pressure LMCH is dealing with. Point out through that the different property tax rates experienced by different APCs and Cs. That's sort of where we're residential versus institutional, and just sort of say that we welcome any conversation to sort of, see if there's any relief there. That we will make best efforts to continue to find efficiencies that have limited to no impact on tenant service delivery.
And capital projects.
I'm sorry.
And capital projects.
Yeah, yes, no impact on the capital program. Okay, yes. And then request support in advocating for changes to Ontario Works and ODSP shelter rates for RGI. to find a way to bring more provincial funding to support the RGI program and increase in revenue. Some along those lines. Those are the sort of elements I heard through the process. So just looking to see if that's something that I've missed something. I tried not to add something.
I think that's a good summary.
John, does that?
Yep.
Friendly kind of add some proper words to create sentences in terms of the recommendation, but I think there's those four thrusts.
Yeah, and I would agree that the advocacy with the province has to continue, of course, and that's something where there's alignment already, and I agree with Councillor McAllister. That we can't be touching the capital stuff. That stuff is long overdue, and needs to happen.
Okay.
Yep.
So do we need Melissa to add the words to that, or are we prepared to move the motion? I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm gonna step out from the Robert's rules.
Yeah, just do it, Robert.
You can do a motion to amend the recommendation and then add those lines. in
Yeah.
there.
Yeah,
Okay,
That's fine.
okay.
please don't make.
Okay. So as amended.
As amended, yes. That gets you out of a lot of trouble.
Motion as amended.
The motion as amended has been put forward by Mayor Grantham, seconded by Councillor McAllister, all in favor. Okay. Good discussion, good summary.
Do we have to receive that report though too?
Thank you. Councillor. And a motion to receive that report for information. By Kara, seconds. Councilor McAllister, Sarah, all in favor? It's carried. That is the end of the Finance and Audit and Risk Committee reports.
Thank you. So we'll go on to number 10, presentations. I'm not aware of any. No in camera, no new business, so I just need a motion for adjournment. Somebody please, moved by Councilor McAllister, seconded by Kara, all in favor? Meeting's adjourned. It's been a slice.